Hello everyone, I am ElusiveXia with a video that is different than what I normally do on here. It is my personal aim on this channel to do what video games are supposed to do and provide an escape from all the heavy drama surrounding everything. And it's why I often try to avoid certain topics, even though that task is proving to be much harder to do these days. Because even the most sacred areas of my happiness is increasingly becoming tainted by the influence of others, and that is where I need to throw in my own 2 cents. Now, while this video is focused on Silksong in particular, this is the only footage you are going to see on the game throughout the entire video, as I'd rather not spoil this game because it is brand new, unless I'm trying to make a point somewhere. So instead, I'm going to be throwing in footage of other games I am currently playing. Also, if I sound off in any way, it is because I'm recovering from a nasty virus and some of its after effects is still lingering. Anyway, no more wasting time. For those who are unaware, Silksong recently came out, gave the AAA studios a wake-up call, and the wave of shoppers were so massive it caused every single digital store to crash that day. Yeah, to say this game is popular is an understatement. However, while players were getting cozy and expecting to ease their way into Silksong's world, this game welcomed everyone with open arms covered in sandpaper and cactus needles drenched in lemon juice. A lot of people were not prepared for the difficulty this game was going to provide. Enemies were able to deal 2 points of damage as opposed to only removing 1, unlike the previous game. And this was on top of Hornet's agile playstyle requiring some time for players to make adjustments before they can take on the challenge. But instead of doing what most gamers would do in this situation, which is to slow down, learn, and try again, they complained to the developers about how Silksong laid them out and exposed them for having a skill issue. To everyone's surprise, including my own, Team Cherry actually listened to them and lowered the game's difficulty. Now, not to blow this way out of proportion, the only areas that was affected by the difficulty nerf were specifically in the beginning phases by reducing the amount of damage some of the early enemies and bosses were able to do to Hornet, reduce the fall damage during precision platforming sections, and they've made some adjustments to the game's economy so players don't need to grind for currency as much. While there were good intentions behind these changes, it is very easy to see why this would rub people the wrong way and even cause some potential players to leave the game alone entirely. Now, Silksong is not the only game that was affected by some kind of difficulty nerf, as there were others before it. Who remembered the new player filter that is Armored Core 6 and its infamous tutorial boss for a game that is known for its high difficulty in the past? Lies of P is another Souls-like game that got an update back in 2023 where the bosses were made easier, reduced enemy damage, and if I'm not mistaken, the stamina recovery was increased. And we can't forget Shadow of the Elder Tree getting hit with a nerf stick too in some areas. I bring all of these examples up because I've noticed that in the recent years, most of these games that were built with a high difficulty curve in mind are having its edges buffered out, if you know what I mean. And when these things happen, it often causes a split among its communities. You have one group who wish the developers would have kept the difficulty the same and tell the other newcomers to learn, adapt, and get good like the rest of them. On the other hand, however, the newcomers and in some cases veteran gamers will welcome these new changes either because it makes these difficult games more approachable, or it allows them to actually sit down and play them without having their time wasted due to a busy lifestyle they must upkeep. And quite frankly, both of these arguments have good points. Let's start with the high difficulty side of things first. You see, the beauty of playing these games that are more difficult than the average experience is that, in a way, it builds character. Whenever you die over and over again but keep coming back and learning from your mistakes is how we build up resilience. Along with that, we become more persistent, patient, and harden our mental toughness. Things like that are useful not only to these virtual worlds we escape to, but they also come in handy in real life situations. And let's not forget about that raw emotional payoff we get once we overcome a mighty obstacle. Go on and think back to a time when you sat there and fought tooth and nail to get through a very difficult moment during your journey as a gamer. It could be a boss, a stage, anything. I genuinely want to know in the comments below. I know this game is not all that known for being difficult, but the first time I got to experience a high like this was back when I beat the Death Egg Zone in Sonic 2 on the Genesis. Everyone who went through the original version knows why that stage was so hellish, as it puts you against two difficult bosses back to back with no rings to bail you out if you took damage. Even though it was so many years ago, I still remember how nerve-wracking those fights were, but I also remember the wave of emotions that carried on after I landed the final hit. And those same moments can still happen in these difficult games today. They don't all need to be from Soulsborne titles either. Some can be experienced in slower paced genres like turn-based RPGs. Mecha Seymour from Final Fantasy X instantly comes to mind. Other moments can even sneak their way into games in the form of difficulty spikes out of nowhere. But no matter what the scenario, the key thing to do in the face of such adversity is to learn, adapt, and get good. Take a minute to learn all of your tools, figure out what could be done differently to get around this hurdle, work on your mechanical skills if it's specifically a you problem. When you do all of these things, you'll be amazed at what you're able to do, and in a way, it can permanently change how you approach every game moving forward. However, by complaining to the creators until they give you what you want instead of taking the time to overcome these challenges on your own, that is not only potentially taking away the experience from other players depending on how the developers carry it out, it's also in a way hurting your own growth, especially since this is not normally how things work, even more so out in the real world. Hell, in the earlier days of gaming, we didn't have the luxury of patch updates. If the game is hard, that's it. Either you get your weight up or kick rocks. Classic Mega Man, Contra, Earthbound, Ninja Gaiden, yeah, all of those games did not care about your feelings, nor did they hold your hand. They certainly didn't care about mine when the villains turned my characters into a digital corpse. Our only choice were to make like the heroes we played as and overcome what was thrown at us, plain and simple. In a way, it molded us into the resilient type of people we see today. If we keep going in the direction of begging for difficulty nerfs, we'll end up with more cases like the Dawn Trail era of Final Fantasy XIV, where during that time period, the game may as well be known as baby's first MMO, seeing as how all the jobs have been toned down to a point where they either play exactly alike or barely have any identity. But like I said earlier, sometimes there is a benefit to toning down the difficulty. We're going to shift gears here and talk more about that now. There is definitely a case that can be made for a situation where the games do need to have its difficulty pulled back just a bit, as sometimes these developers can cook a little too much when creating these challenges. Going back to my earlier example of Sonic 2, personally I feel like the stage at least should have had a few rings, no more than 3 of them. While it provided one hell of a challenging experience, especially with the looming threat of a game over resetting your entire progress, I know people who never beat that game because of how overtuned the difficulty was. You get hit once during either battle and you'll need to start the entire stage all over again. Lose all your lives and your continues and it's right back at the beginning of the game for you. And not to keep picking on the hedgehog, I swear I love Sonic to death, but another example of overtuned difficulty would be in a game like Sonic Unleashed, where there is a massive difficulty spike in the middle of your progression in an otherwise well-balanced experience. That kind of difficulty for its given audience, which is mostly targeted at kids, isn't really a good match, and it can wall off a few people from accomplishing the game, at least until they get older or develop the skills to overcome the challenge. But what about the games that are designed for audiences who prefer that higher difficulty setting? Admittedly, this is where things can get a bit harder for me to defend here, but I will try my best. Using Elden Ring as an example, I know a lot of people who really wanted to get into that game and experience everything its world has to offer, especially since there's a lot of beauty that can be discovered, but they refuse to pick it up due to the fact that they don't have that kind of lifestyle in order to give the game its fine wine and dining experience it deserves. Games like Elden Ring requires you to spend a considerable amount of time in order to reap the rewards, and when you have your hands full with a lot of life-demanding elements like a job that will work the starch out of you, a life skill you're trying to master so you can can improve your situation, or raising a kid and possibly more, a lot of the time you don't get the luxury to just sit down and play through a game that requires far more time than others. And with how fast games are being released, you're going to need to pick your battles wisely. Your time in this situation is limited. Do you really want to spend that short window being stuck in the same spot for hours only to progress 15% more of what you did in your last session? Or would you rather place your limited time into a more balanced experience where you could quadruple that progression? This is where a tone down in difficulty would be a proven benefit for individuals like these who want to enjoy these games without the need to sacrifice 10 years of their life in the process. At that point, these games will just end up being in their backlog forever, which is a shame because some of these harder games, especially with RPG mechanics, are filled with a lot of depth to them. It's pretty much the exact same reason why a lot of players refuse to get into fighting games, despite these games having tons of depth into them as well. There's a reason why developers are toning them down so they can make them more approachable to wider audiences, much to the dismay of the FGC. So then, what would be the solution for these types of games moving forward? Should we keep them difficult so the audience who enjoys them can continue to thrive in their favorite genre, or tone them down for newcomers at the risk of alienating their current fans? I'm going to say this right now, there is no easy solution to this, as you're going to piss off someone no matter what is done. However, Silksong does open the door to one that I believe would make the most sense. Understandably, a lot of people bought Silksong either knowing exactly what they're getting themselves into and are more than eager to jump into that needle-coated embrace I've mentioned earlier, or not knowing anything about this game at all and making that group hit the moonwalk button. The solution that I would present is that if the developers really feel the need to tone the game down, just make a separate mode that can revert the changes back to the game's original design instead of just forcing the update on everyone. That way, the newcomers won't drop or return the game while having that breathing room to adjust to everything, and those who are already committed won't feel like they've been ripped off because what they purchased was altered. In fact, I like to argue that last point is likely the reason why a lot of people are really up in arms about this. I don't know a single person alive who likes the idea of having their product changed on a dime right after they made their initial purchase, especially if they were looking forward to the challenges that lie ahead. Sure, the ones who complained earlier will now have their cake and eat it too. Meanwhile, the ones who were fine with its initial difficulty is kind of told to kick rocks and enjoy the mandatory knee pads. Now, I want you to keep in mind, I wouldn't tone these difficult games down to a point where it's now as easy as playing Kingdom Hearts. I was thinking more along the lines of Stellar Blade's level of difficulty when you're playing on its story mode, then gradually ramping up the difficulty to its more traditional setting by the mid-game. For context, Stellar Blade story mode pretty much tones down all of the enemies, giving you larger windows so you can parry them and you yourself will take less damage, whereas in its normal mode, prepare to die a lot. I feel that if these difficult by design games were made with a mode like that in mind, we'd likely get a lot less cases like what we've seen in Silksong, Lies of P, and many other cases that I could name. After all, difficulty in these games have been toned down far earlier than we can remember. Let's not forget that Sonic 3 had its difficulty nerfed in Hydrosity and Launch Base by simply removing two specific springs that were considered dickish in the complete versions of the game. I swear this video is centered on Silksong and not Sonic. Anyway, while this video is coming to an end, the discussion doesn't have to. We can hash it out in the comments below and share our thoughts on this whole thing. Also, let me know if you want to see more videos of this format. This is a good time to do so as I mainly do retrospectives and reviews on here, but I'm not opposed to switching things up every now and then as I like to take care of my own here. Feel free to subscribe if you're new, make sure you hit the like button as well as it's going to help the channel out greatly and I appreciate it if you do. And to those who have already subscribed and have been kicking it with me for a while up to this point, I want you to know that all of you are MVPs and I love every last one of you. I hope I get to see all of you in the next one. This is HollowKnight, logging out.